It's so bad. Now, we've talked about Jurassic Park several times before on the channel. It's one of the most important and impactful VFX movies of all time. It's also just like an excellent film. But a lot of people still think that the effects from that movie hold up today. 'Cause they do. So why is that? In contrast, in more recent years, the Jurassic World movies have come out, and those movies have incredible visual effects in them. From a technical standpoint, they are absolutely far superior to the original Jurassic Park, and yet audiences still feel that they're not as good. I find this question fascinating, and so to answer that, I think we need to study the original film and their approach to visual effects. So Jordan and I sat down to watch one of the most classic scenes from the movie, when the T-Rex breaks out of the park. Anytime you see a close-up of the dinosaur, it's real. Stan Winston's team made a full-scale animatronic T-Rex, and that's what you're seeing every time there's a close-up. And it looks great, because it's real.
And how awesome is it as an artist to have a perfect reference on set in the same lighting conditions in other footage that you can always reference to see how close you are.
Absolutely.
We can have it right
Is this the first actual CG shot we see of the T-Rex?
They're very particular about when and how they're showing the dinosaur, which is honestly, I think, a large part as to why it holds up.
Spielberg understood that the CGI here wasn't going to be perfectly photoreal. It was the first time he'd ever worked with CGI, and so he approached it kind of from the same sort of experience of working with miniatures, because that was his experience, and so a lot of those same sort of techniques crossover. So he decided to basically obscure it the best way he could. Very, very intense directional lighting, shooting at night, having rain on everything so everything's reflective.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to have CGI things be reflective. Remember, this is the first film that ILM is doing right off doing T2.
Yeah.
And of course, Terminator 2, they decided to do as a chrome guy because, again, chrome reflections are easier to do than actually trying to figure out how much reflected light would tint the color of a thing.
Here, he steps down and puddles splash up, which is interesting because there's no actual puddles under the feet.
Yeah, he's just stepping on mud, but it's like he's stepping on like an actual puddle.
And it's another thing that, again, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it cements it even further. The shadow matching is so good.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very similar.
Especially considering that the shadow that they had is just a simple, planar shadow, and that's it. This was before ambient occlusion was a thing, so it's like technically the ground should be a little bit darker, directly underneath his belly there, versus out underneath his head, but with a single shadow plane there on the bottom, you're kind of missing out on that. And you can see it. You can really see it here, especially like right next to his feet here.
Yeah.
It's just the same blank darkness going out from that shadow. Then we immediately cut to inside of the car, looking at the T-Rex. This one kind of betrays itself a little bit because we are looking at a very strong headlight coming from the perspective of the camera.
Yep.
So that's immediately gonna give it a little bit of a different feel as opposed to every other shot where it's more edge lit, kind of from behind and to the side.
Here, you're kind of exposing a little bit of the dated nature of the visual effects when it's in bright headlights versus one strong top light and the lightning strikes, which helps obviously cement the composite.
The car here is completely practical. They knocked a real car over, and you can see it right here. You see the cables?
Cables on the
little
left side.
cables that are supposed to hold it together?
Yeah.
In the action of the moment, you can't quite tell what they are, but it's totally what they are. And then, he bites the tire, bites off the transmission or whatever. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh wow. Okay, so they had the car flipped over. They must have crushed it somehow and then just kind of married the animation of the T-Rex to it and just added fake tires because the tires looked weird. Just before filming this, discovered that the entire car here is computer generated. Insane. Which I don't think anyone ever noticed.
Yeah, it's so
No one ever noticed. They were like, oh yeah, it's just a car. Of course, it goes without saying, the animation sells this. And the method they actually used to animate the T-Rex is actually pretty interesting. So we recently had Adam Savage on the React Couch with us, and he broke down exactly what they did.
The dinosaur input device is an absolutely important piece of special effects history. This was what allowed physical animators who worked with stop motion to actually use a set of potentiometers built into a framework that looked like a dinosaur to animate the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park.
dude.
So rather than CG people moving sliders, it was stop-mo animators literally moving things.
In a sense, it's like stop motion mocap.
Yes, it's stop-motion mocap, and later on Pixar used that same philosophy to build animation software that you didn't have to be a CG animator to use.
Oh yeah, by the way, subscribe. Adam Savage on the React Couch coming soon. The challenges they faced back then are easy today, like the limitations of their render engines and textures and lighting and stuff. The challenges we face today came second nature to these artists because they were top-tier artists. And so, being able to replicate what they put into making these shots work comes down more to the filmmaking and experience than it does the fancy rendering engines. So, what I think we should do is try to take some of our modern approaches that they struggled with back then, the rendering engines, the compositing, all of that is relatively easy for us today.
Right.
But if we can kind of just apply the same sort of aesthetic and techniques that they used back then maybe we can overcome the sort of problems that Jurassic World had. So hopefully we can make something that is the best of both World and Park.
And gain an even deeper appreciation for the insane work that went into this, and just how groundbreaking it was.
All right, now it's time to actually do it in a day.
Let's go.
And looking at this, like this whole backdrop here is just speaking Jurassic Park to me. This was its destiny. We gotta use it for that. We would just have to do it at like a miniature scale and pretend it's bigger. So that's exactly what we did. We decided to do a full-on miniature shoot of Jurassic Park in our backyard. So we got some 16th scale miniature Jeeps, we wetted down all of the mud and the leaves to make it all reflective, and that allowed us to go on to focus on the lighting, which I believe to be probably the most critical component to making the T-Rex look lifelike. So we tried to approach our lighting the same way the filmmakers did on Jurassic Park. We had a big spotlight shooting down coming from behind and above our whole scene. We had a tiny bit of fill so that the front wasn't perfectly dark, but I didn't think the spotlight was quite enough to really connect the T-Rex to the scene, because we have all of the struggles of doing a miniature set as well that we have to overcome. So I decided to add a little light for a street lamp. Literally putting a little light into the shot to kind of bounce some more orangish light to kind of get some color contrast in there, I think will help sell the overall scale of the shot. On top of that, we are going to add a huge amount of rain. Now, we got some of that in camera there on set, but the problem that I didn't really anticipate, water droplets at miniature scale are the size of fists, and it instantly made those Jeeps look like toys. So that meant that we had to keep everything wet but dry off the Jeeps. I ended up being pretty pleased with this sort of results we ended up getting. It almost feels like we could drop it into the original movie, because you know, they had giant aloe vera trees back then. We have our plates, we'll combine those later, because right now I'm more concerned about how are we gonna get a CG dinosaur.
I found this beautiful free model online that is totally unusable. So we gotta do it a little better.
Normally, when we need a 3D model, we hit all the big ones, Turbo Squid, CG Trader, and then you sort by price and you go to the free ones. What is freely available? A lot of the time, the free stuff is pretty good. In this situation though, so I got to thinking, and I realized it's always been a dream of mine to drop the big bucks on a 3D model like that on Turbo Squid. Because you see them, they show up at the top search results, because Turbo Squid wants you to buy the expensive models. And I was like, someday, I'll be able to afford a 3D model. Well, thanks to the power of using other people's money.
Yes, what a power indeed.
I tasked Jordan with finding a 3D model of a T-Rex, and he finds one that costs $254.
I got bougie taste. This is the daddy. This is the granddaddy model.
I think we should buy that super expensive 3D model. Oh my God, it feels so...
This is a moment, isn't it? This for all of us.
You made it.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like we finally made it.
Hey Wren, can we all press it together?
You know what? All right, you guys ready?
Yep.
I'm excited.
Purchase.
Card declined.
I'll never
No, I'm kidding.
Now that we have our T-Rex, we've got to animate it. Now, the problem is that we don't have the same sort of dinosaur input device that they had at ILM, but what we do have is a motion capture suit, and we also have access to the world's most talented and impressive motion capture performance artist in the world. I'm gonna call Clown.
Yeah.
What's up, Wren?
Yo, do you like animals? Do you like extinct animals?
Which animals are extinct? Name an extinct animal.
Dinosaur.
Another one.
I was hoping that you would do us the honor of being the mocapped actor for a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Are you saying I have tiny arms?
Basically, we're trying to recreate the scene from the original Jurassic Park movie with the same lighting and conditions and rain and whatnot, but we don't have the animation chops to be able to honor the ILM artists who made the original T-Rex. If you can't do this, I totally understand. We'll just call up our B choice, Andy Serkis, and we'll get him on it. But I mean, if you don't want him to be on this project,
Use number. You don't need it. 'Cause I'm coming in.
Heck yes!
Yes, we got
Yes! Dude.
We got him.
It's the role you were born for, man.
Cool, I'll let you get back to the last bite of your cake, and I will see you then.
Bye, Clint.
So, Red.
I'll get our hands in there.
Bye, Clint.
Guys, I'm here with a very special announcement. We have some incredible new inventory available right now on corridordigital.store. The thing that I am most proud of is the brand new bomber jacket, okay? This thing has a beautiful map design on the inside that our very own Gabe Peregrino came up with and designed himself. It's all the locations we've filmed at in LA over the years. It came out so good, I'm so proud of this thing, but we were only able to make a few hundred because that's the way that it is right now. And so if you want this jacket, you gotta get over there right now, corridordigital.store. If you order now, it'll be available for you before Christmas, so that's awesome. And we also have a huge slate of incredible inventory available right now just in time before Christmas. We have this sick trucker hat. We also have the mocap trucker hat, don't forget about that one. We've got this incredible new book bag. It's got sweet little tags on it. We also have women's cuts, joggers, jackets, hats, you name it, we got it, but it sells out fast. Check it out, corridordigital.store. If you're a member of our website, don't forget you get 15% off all merch all the time, and you get first dibs. If you guys aren't subscribed on the site, this is the best way to support us, and if you just want to rep us, we try to make cool stuff that we enjoy wearing, that feels nice, looks nice, and is affordable. So thanks for the support, thanks for watching, and I'm gonna T-Rex back on out of here, back to the video. See you guys later.
We have brought in Clint today because he is the best motion capture artist alive today. And now he's going to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I'm glad Clint came through because I didn't want to have to call my backup option, Andy Serkis. The last time we hung out, it didn't really go too well. But, you know, Clint, he came through and he's our #1 choice. Win-win for everyone, right?
I hadn't had a chance to look at any dinosaur reference, or all I know is what I remember of Jurassic Park. And what's that one guy, Jim Carrey, in that one movie where he pretended to be a raptor? My recollection of dinosaurs is what I'm bringing to the table.
Okay, we just get him kind of like walking through, maybe like a little bit of like a sniff in the car, and then going, "Roar," and then walking off. That's like bare minimum what we need to make this whole project work.
It's inspiring to see the
ready?
masterwork.
All right, and oh my God! And that's a wrap on Clint.
I just remembered what it was like to be a dinosaur. That's all I had.
We now have everything we need. We've got the animation data, we've got the CG T-Rex, and we've got the footage. It is now time to piece these things together.
So before we ever had Clint's master performance, I ran some initial tests with the cheaper version of the dinosaur. Essentially, my approach was to take a human form, which is, you know, 2 legs just like a dinosaur, 2 arms just like a dinosaur, a head and a neck, and just kind of move them in space so that those legs are longer, the neck is longer, and just the proportions match that of a T-Rex. And for the most part, it worked pretty well. It looks a bit Barney-like, it looks a little rubbery, but overall, it kind of gets the job done. Mind you, this was with motion capture data that was not emulating a dinosaur at all. With Clint's performance, I mean, he was beautifully emulating the spirit of the T-Rex. So we were able to take that, stretch those hips, stretch those legs, and shrink those little arms down, and shove that in a much higher end model. And rigging it, I figured, would be kind of a similar exercise to this one, but I kind of came into some issues. The Xsense motion capture does a really nice job of stabilizing the motion capture, meaning it's keeping the feet on the ground the whole time. And it looks awesome for any human that you're rigging. It does a really nice job. I don't think it was made to turn human into dino, because once I elongated those bones, the little bit of noise that existed in the human version was extrapolated dramatically. And all of a sudden, the little bit of shaking that you got was way bigger for the feet, and they started clipping right through the floor. It was pretty egregious, and what I ended up having to do was going almost frame by frame so that anytime they clip below, I shift them back up. It was a lot of work, but I think I got it to a pretty good place. So much like the original artists of Jurassic Park, you have to do some manual adjusting of the bones. The performance was kind of lackluster. When Wren first reviewed it, he was like, it looks like Barney the dinosaur, because it's literally just a human being moving with like this static head and very little life. So when Clint bends over, I shifted all the spine bones to kind of counter it as like a counterweight, and then hand animated the head looking up and the jaw opening and roaring and doing all that stuff to try and give it some additional life. Another big giveaway that this is mocap data is that the tail obviously has no reference of how to move or where to move, because Clint, as far as I know, doesn't have a tail. What we did here is we created what's called spline dynamics, where you basically take the first bone in the chain and the last bone in the chain, and you attach them via a cord. As you can see, this green little line, it's running from the base bone all the way to the tip. And that line, the tension on that line is literally what is driving the dynamics of the spline. So wherever this one goes, this one tries to hang on via the cord. It helps add a lot of realism to the motion of the tail itself, because when the hips swing, the tail has a delayed swing. Those are just a couple little things that we tried to do to add some additional realism to our animation of the dinosaur. So we've got our dino rigged and walking and roaring and looking good. Now we got to get him into our scene. And the relighting aspect of this is always the trickiest unless you come prepared. And luckily on the shoot day, I was able to take out my 360 camera and get a bunch of different exposures of the actual lighting environment itself. When all those are stitched together, that's called an HDRI. And what I'm able to do with that is basically put it on a giant sphere in the scene, expand that sphere, and use the luminance of that HDRI to light the scene exactly as it was lit on the day. This shot, for example, we have the HDRI, which is giving the ambient light. That's all the bounce light that's coming from around it. It's giving you some of the main lights too. But typically with HDRIs, at least what I found is, they don't give you strong enough main lights. So I've supplemented in some additional lights inside of Octane to really up the intensity of that lighting and make it look a lot better. So you're getting a really nice rim light when the dinosaur passes by, and you're getting a real nice natural shadow being cast on the floor and on the Jeep scan that we got. Wren had a really good idea to actually scan the Jeep models that we used in the miniature shoot so that we could position them in 3D space and use the shadows from the dinosaur to cast over the actual geometry of the Jeep. We can then use those shadows in the compositing stage and get a whole nother level of realism for the look. All right, I mean, that pretty much wraps up everything that I'm doing, so I'm gonna start kicking out some render passes for Wren so he can get started on the compositing phase.
Okay, so we've got the dinosaur render ready to go. As you can see, I can scrub through the whole thing here. So this is looking pretty good. But before I can actually mess with this any further, I've got to combine the plates of footage that we shot outside. So this is the footage with all of the lights on straight from the camera here. And we need to paint out the light. That's easy enough. Gone. So I'm able to actually bring back in a lot of the rain elements that I created by literally sprinkling some water in the air. And I got a little street lamp that I added, and I put it in the same place as the light here. So we've got the street lamp and we've got the atmospherics, but I couldn't get around the idea that it just looked like a bunch of aloe vera sitting there, because it is. So I ended up just finding an image of a jungle on the internet and I dropped it in. Now obviously a green jungle photo like this is not what we're after, so tint it blue, get the levels correct, and voila, look at that. I think this ends up looking a little better because of the depth that it creates in the shot. Because now it looks like the set actually extends into a jungle, and it helps alleviate the sort of miniature look that we had going. We've got our shot, and I think it looks pretty decent. It's time to drop in our T-Rex. So I've got the T-Rex in the scene, but to really marry the render to the footage, we need shadows. And traditionally, what you do for a shadow pass is basically just drop in your black and white render of a shadow, you know, drop the opacity a little bit, and you get your shadow. That's what we usually always do. But here we're doing something a little different. Notice how the specular highlights that are showing up through the shadow? That's not how light works. These specular highlights are coming from the lights. If the T-Rex was actually blocking them, those big specular highlights wouldn't be there. But fortunately, I've got the footage without the lights on, so I'm gonna actually use the black part of the shadow as essentially a track matte to reveal the plate without the lights on. So now it's only showing up wherever the shadow is hitting the ground and the Jeep. And that's really cool because it still gives you that shadow look, but it's actually doing it in an optically correct way. You know, you wouldn't really see this method used very often in modern movies because they would just pretty much do the entire muddy ground in CG because it's like not that hard to do for VFX houses. But since we knew exactly where the effects were going to be applied, we knew how to support it with the filmmaking. So the dino is in there, but it's still not a done shot here. We need more atmospherics. We need rain, and thanks to Action VFX, they have several packs of rain just falling through the sky, rain hitting the ground and splashing back up, rain hitting windshields and sliding down the glass. My rule of thumb when it comes to adding elements like rain or fire or smoke or dust or whatever is that more is usually better. With everything on, this is our final shot. And I think it looks pretty dang good. I'm gonna go ahead and let this render overnight, and tomorrow morning, Jordan and I will take a look. Here we go, we've got it now. We've finished the shot. We have accomplished what the Jurassic Park period of time couldn't even do. That makes sense, doesn't it?
That makes so much sense.
But okay, enough has been said. Here's the shot. I mean, okay, we set out to do a few specific things. Obviously, we couldn't get the whole production value of a Jurassic World or Jurassic Park movie. That being said, I think we kind of nailed a couple of the aspects very well. One, I think your rendering of the dino, very good.
Thank you very much.
The spotlight is perfectly placed, and I think having that street lamp in there as just an extra element is really pulling it all together.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I'm actually surprised at how well the mocap held up. That was one area I was really suspicious of, and it's not perfect. I'm really happy with how far we got in the time that we had overall.
Clinton did a great job, but I don't think this compares to the actual animation from Jurassic Park.
I totally agree with you, 100%.
Because there are only a few VFX shots in the original Jurassic Park, they were able to put the tender love and care into each and every single animation.
And it also helps that they were absolute geniuses. That's very helpful.
For one thing, it's hard to kind of get this sort of like mass. Clint doesn't have a giant tail that weighs a quarter of his body either. You know, a T-Rex literally has a head this way and a tail that way with the feet in the middle. And that kind of acts as like a counterbalance to his entire body, and when you don't have that, next time we have Clint be a dinosaur, we're gonna give him a big tail.
Yeah, I can just hang on his back too. I'm okay with that. It doesn't feel like a person in a suit to me at this stage, which I think is a win already.
Yeah, and that's what I'm most proud about, is that like, yeah, there's some rough surfaces to this, but like, it works, you know? It shows that less is more. This shot, if this was a modern movie, it'd be all CG brush behind the dinosaurs. You'd probably have the whole ground be replaced, all of the rain. The whole shot's CG, might as well be, right? That's how they would do it these days.
I would think so.
And most of this shot is real, whether or not it's what we filmed in the backyard or the actual real rain plates we got from Action VFX. The only thing that's fake is the dinosaur. You know, like I think this is a pretty dang good render.
I think it's worth a high five.
Dude,
I'll take it.
VFX is about so much more than what you can just render out of a computer. It takes a lot of, artistic intent and insight around the whole process to achieve something that not only looks real, but makes you believe that it's real. Even if you think our shot isn't that good, we were not trying to actually make a better VFX shot or do something in less time. The goal here was to simply celebrate the amount of artistic skill that went into making the Jurassic Park movie. So much more went into those sequences than just hitting some buttons on a computer. So it's not hard to imagine why Jurassic World doesn't work as well, because certain aspects of that film just aren't as masterful as Jurassic Park. In Jurassic Park, there were 63 visual effects shots, but in Jurassic World, there were over 2,000 of them. And at that scale, the craftsmanship gets a little diluted. They did not use their effects sparingly. And I think Dr. Malcolm said it best.
You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so it didn't require any discipline to attain it. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Oh man, thank you so much for watching. This was so much fun to do. Leave a comment down below with what other sort of historical VFX you want us to sort of reapproach and explain why they're so special. And also subscribe because we got some really fun content coming your way.